Hi Riviera Fireflies, well this is the first in our short series of festive fun. This one also could be for the yachties actually, because even if you're listening to this in spring 2018, the information is going to be really useful for you if you're working down in the yachts, well in fact anywhere in the world. I just wanted to share a couple of useful groups for those that are in the yachting industry or want to get into the yachting industry, because I do see many of you come onto Côte d'Azur Living looking for jobs. Where you really need to go is Antibes Yacht Crew Jobs on Facebook, or the Crew Network is also another really dynamic and interactive group where you can find out about all the training courses and all the jobs that are going on locally in Antibes. I also came across a really interesting looking app. I'd love to know if you find it useful. It's called Yachtneeds app, and it looks like it's the kind of thing that all the yacht crew should have on their phones. Well, coming up next is something for the yachties. We're recording this in November 2017, just running into December. So also for those that enjoy a good bottle of wine or champagne with your Christmas or your holiday meals, because I have got Claire Motteshaw coming up. She works and is the director for VSF Vins Sans Frontières, and so we're talking all things champagne, prosecco and fine wines. So VSF are a supplier of fine wines to the fine yachts. They've got a global team who are going to be celebrating 25 years in business in 2018. They also have a VSF cellar with 38,000 bottles of wine and champagne and goodies. Gosh, that would be quite a party if that was all opened up, wouldn't it? So VSF also run wine courses for those that are in the yachting and the hospitality industry, which look really interesting. You can find them on their website. Claire's got a really impressive CV, and I love the fact that she changed from banking into this industry and yet finds it's kind of similar. So I really enjoyed getting to know the lady behind the company, and I hope you do too. Let's roll.
Having successfully launched 3 businesses, bilingual mum to 2 and entrepreneur Antonia Bowes-Brown has connected with thousands of people, both French and international, since moving to the French Riviera. These connections allow her to speak with successful local businesses and inspirational people about life here on the Côte d'Azur and share it with you. Welcome to the Riviera Firefly podcast with your host, entrepreneur and my mum, Antonia Bowes-Brown.
Hi.
Hi, Claire.
Welcome, Antonia.
Claire is from VSF, which is the Vins Sans Frontières. I like the French name, it's cool.
Yeah, basically we're a company that supply wine to yachts. We have been around for 25 years next year. But I love the story. My husband and I got involved 10 years ago, but I love the story. The company basically started by the former owner going around trying to sell Australian Chardonnay out of the boot of his car to yachties. The idea being that most yacht crew were sort of Antipodean or English and not used to just drinking French wine. And the company has moved on from there. We now have over sort of 35,000 bottles of wine, either here or in England, or London in Bond. But most of what we do is obviously providing French and Italian wines, funnily enough now, given our start to the yachts. But we also have a tremendous amount of New World wines, as I hate to call them, but as they get called.
Because that's quite shocking for an English person used to going to Sainsbury's. You kind of go into the supermarket here thinking you'll get your Chilean or your whatever.
No.
And it's like there's this market hold on just French wines, maybe 1 or 2 Italian.
And also maybe a couple of halal. And Lebanese, that tends to be. I remember when we first moved down here, Auchan in Grasse were having a special on Villa Maria. And the lady couldn't believe I moved my 2 small children out of the chariot to fill my chariot with Villa Maria. But obviously many of our clients who like to drink are here on the French and Italian Riviera, so they drink French and Italian wines. But a lot of Americans have been coming over lately, given where the euro has been going against the dollar, want to drink their own wines. And I think, my husband jokes he literally bought the company to keep me in Cloudy Bay. So even though Cloudy Bay is now owned by lvmh, it is the whole idea that I've at least got my Cloudy Bay.
I love that. I think it's great to have a company that you can get benefit from. That gives you motivation to get out of bed in the morning, doesn't it? So take me back. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Ware in Hertfordshire, a town called Ware.
Yeah, my aunt used to live there.
There you go. My dad was the mayor of Ware, and sort of born a few years ago now. But we sort of stayed around in Ware, then moved up to London for college, and from then went to university reading banking and finance, and then worked in various financial institutions for a little while, but very much sort of Hertfordshire girl, born and bred.
I love that you had a whole banking background, and then now this is all the wine. I think it's great when you can have such a career switch.
I think, but it's interesting. I would say that the career is pretty much the same. As my career in banking was, I was in fixed income sales. I was selling government securities to hedge funds at the very end of my career. And your junior hedge fund manager has as much responsibility for the money as the chief stewardess who thinks the boat's hers. And that's fair enough. You know, it's actually less about what you're selling. It's more about the service you're providing and interacting with people. And that's what drives me, is the service. Yeah. You know, when we say we're open between...
Is it more fun selling wine, though, than selling hedge funds?
No. And I think, you know, I think a lot of people will be quite surprised to know that I sell more water than I sell wine.
Yeah, so, that's incredible.
Yeah. Most wine orders come in with 3 slabs of Coke, 3 slabs of this, and I can, if you really wanted to play trivia, I can tell you every size and material of every single water provider, you know... And the requests we get, we sold glacierwater, we've sold Voss, obviously, from Norway is a big one down here. We sell Fiji water. And I have actually a bottle on my desk that somebody's trying to get me to try and list at €85 a bottle for water. No gold or anything in it.
Must do amazing things,
water.
Right?
Apparently.
Maybe it gets rid of wrinkles. So
stick to tap.
So you were a Hertfordshire girl, then into banking. What brought you over here to the south of France?
Baby number 2.
Really?
In all honesty, I know this sounds very cliched, but I had baby number 1 and very quickly after baby number unplanned 2, and realised I'd hit the glass ceiling. It wasn't the career I had in the city, and I do actually, this would be one of my highs. I count myself as being very fortunate. I had a fantastic career. It's a perfect career for a woman in terms of financial independence and all of that, but by the time in my late 30s I had my second child, I had first one at 36, second one at 38, I pretty much decided that it was time to take a slower pace of life. And my husband's business at the time was portable. And so we looked literally, where could you live that had snow and sea? And we looked at Sydney, Vancouver and here. I voted Sydney, obviously didn't, only purely because my French at the time wasn't very good, but my husband speaks fluent French, and obviously thinking of the grandparents as well, we moved here. My former colleague from Lehman Brothers, where I worked for many years, actually has a house in Mougins, and so we came down on a couple of holidays, kind of like what we saw, but it all kind of snowballed. Baby was born in February and we were here by August.
And so VSF, you said, is celebrating 25 years next year, so you would have bought it?
We bought it a couple of years after arriving. We met a couple who knew that the old guy, the proprietor, wanted to actually sell. And so after many sort of protracted negotiations, I think as it was his baby, he wanted to make sure he was handing it over the right way to somebody.
His legacy.
Yeah. But equally, because he'd been running it for 15 years, we could see many different ways of improving it. Not really looking at it from just the idea of service, but obviously wine is an appreciating asset most of the time. You know, if you think about supply and demand of wine, as it gets drunk, there's no more of it. So, for example, one little interesting statistic that I like to talk about with wine, there are more bottles of 1945 Petrus apparently for sale at the moment than actually were ever bottled. So that brings up provenance as well. But it's also, you know, if you think about it, if you've got a great vintage, as it gets drunk, wine appreciates. And so there are very few businesses where you can say that your assets actually appreciate over time. So in some years, we're actually quite pleased if we don't sell anything. Well, obviously not anything, but we like,
because it's still gaining value.
Gaining value. Yeah.
And have you seen some amazing wine cellars down here in the south of France?
Haven't seen any. We would say as is. You don't get to see as though. I haven't seen any. I mean, I think most people tend to sit quite quietly on them. Obviously, with no capital gains tax on wine, it's proved such a brilliant asset class. So a lot of people think that France is the centre of wine. Actually, more wine is held in London than in any other centre because it gets held in bond, which means it's held safely underground. Not a lot of people know, but I think it's out near Walthamstow. If you look underground, there is the largest wine cellar in the world.
Wow.
Held up, where people hold their wine in bond rather than having to have it to drink. I think the temptation is if you have it, you'll drink it.
I would just be so worried to have this, 200-300 euro bottle, and then worry that it would go off, or...
So drink it. That would be my...
That's my philosophy.
I would drink it. I mean, unless it benefits from ageing. I mean, we're very fortunate. We have people spend up to 13,000, 14,000 euros a bottle of wine.
Wow.
I would worry about how much that costs per sip. But I think the thing with wine is to just enjoy it. It's always been my philosophy. I often get asked, what wine would you recommend? What? Yes, as an investment class, I could sit and say, buy Bordeaux 15. You should have bought En Primeur here. You should have done that. But at the end of the day, for me, wine is such a personal thing, and it's what you like putting in your mouth. Honestly, and it just because it costs 300 euros doesn't mean you need to like it any better than the one that costs you 30 euros.
Yeah.
That would be my philosophy on it.
So that leads into a question I had, which was around vegetarians, right? Because, you sort of know which wine, which colour you're supposed to go for when you're eating certain meats or fish and that kind of thing. And then, basically, I've been vegetarian since I was 16, so I just have kind of gone, well, I don't care. Doesn't really
But I
matter,
think you're right.
Yeah?
I think the thing that happens is you match flavour with flavour. So, for example, when they talk about a big piece of steak, that's a big, bold flavour. So they match with a big, bold wine. So if you're drinking a light kind of acidic fish because of the lemon involved, you drink a light acidic wine. So really, when you're matching your wine, you match to whatever flavour is the predominant flavour. So if you've got a tomatoey sort of rich flavour, you go with a richer wine. I'm a big believer that there are the rules, and yes, you can do pairings and you can see why it works. But again, I'm not a big fan of red. So I will drink white with most of my meals, just because I prefer the taste. It's something I prefer to drink. So for your vegetables, you look at what's the predominant flavour.
So
and go with it.
Mr. BB asked, parsnip and sage roulade is apparently what we might be having
this evening.
Christmas Day. Yeah.
I would go with a Chardonnay, with a big oaky Chardonnay, because parsnip's quite sweet and quite woody, and you've got that underlying, so you match the flavour. If you've got a woody Chardonnay, I can tell you some stories about how they put oak into Chardonnay, but if you've got a well-made Chardonnay aged in barrel, then I would put it with that.
Brilliant. Okay, I hope you heard that, Mr. BB.
And I can tell you, no.
Yeah. And what about, I was saying to you a little bit earlier, I used to work for Moetchandon. That was my first job. It was great, actually, because I used to get paid in champagne, like bonuses
Lovely.
in champagne in Dom Perignon. And my job was sort of sending it to people like Cilla Black and all those kind of people. Yeah. So they were the good days. And I obviously got a very good taste. I really enjoyed it. I was only in my 20s. I got very expensive
You've been
taste.
spoiled, haven't you?
Yeah,
Yes.
really early on. But it's quite a heavy taste.
Yeah.
It can be quite heavy, woody, like you said. Now when you sort of see the newer ones that come out, and of course Prosecco, massive now. So what about that?
I was very surprised you go back to the UK and it's Prosecco everywhere.
Yeah.
I think Prosecco. It's why are you drinking champagne? You're drinking champagne because you like the fizz, you like the bubbles, it's fun-filled, it gets you drunk quicker maybe, I don't know. And I think Prosecco is a more economic option for many people. A bottle of Prosecco is probably half the price, if not more sort of value than champagne. And I think people may be warm. If you look at how Alcopots came up with all the sweet drinks and all that sort of, I could never drink them myself, but you were getting sort of fruit juice with alcohol. Maybe tastes have changed a little bit. You get quite fruity, quite not sweet, but sort of very heavy on the fruit side of Prosecco. And so rather than the flinty sort of steel flavour you get with some champagnes, but I would argue mainly it's economic.
Yeah.
Because you're 2 bottles of Prosecco.
Although I remember back in the day when we used to have our tastings, not Dom Perignon per se, but Moetchandon was a lot drier than you were getting in the Sainsbury's, different kind of champagnes that people were buying there, and they were a lot sweeter. So there was definitely people wanted a sweeter. Yeah,
and I think also if you look, I can remember sort of back in the day, my parents buying the demi-sec, which is not sweet at all. Sorry, not dry at all. It's completely sweet. Even brut champagne has added sugar. I think what happens is as people's tastes evolve. I personally like anything non dose because they call it the model's champagne or the model's prosecco, but it is basically no added sugar. Wine, as a lot of people are aware, does actually have a lot of sugar added into it as part of the be they natural or otherwise. But I think prosecco is here to stay as much as the French would like it not to be. But I was amazed how in England there are now more prosecco on the shelves than champagne, and I think that's here to stay.
Yeah, it's certainly the drink of fashion right now, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know if people know how it's made vis-a-vis champagne, but champagne is obviously allowed to form natural bubbles. It's sort of, they riddle it, it matures, it ferments, and you get your bubbles. With prosecco, it's actually added carbon dioxide at the point of bottling. So I think that's why you get smaller, fizzier bubbles. For a while that used to put me off, but not anymore.
Yeah, and it's good to change things around a bit. So what's going to be on your Christmas table then?
I'll be drinking white. I'll start with a delicious bottle of champagne. Luckily, my husband doesn't like it, so that can be me. And then I'll drink white. As I said, I don't think you need to necessarily follow rules. You go with what you think tastes good and what you like to put in your mouth. You could maybe even go with rosé champagne. You've got the cranberry sauce, you've got all the trimmings. You could continue with bubbles all the way through.
I love that, and I love it, especially when you're vegetarian. You sort of feel like you're a problem. So it's great to sort of say anyone can drink whatever they want.
But sometimes I think my problem with red is I started on far too much Bulgarian Cabernet Sauvignon in my early and sort of 20s. But my thing is how much of all of these rules are given because they're trying to sell a product or they're trying to do something. Obviously, some delicious red wines taste brilliant with meat, but some are very unapproachable when they're young. It's all around one's own personal taste. That's why we're all given different taste buds.
Talking about like VSF, so when you bought it and everything like that, that's kind of easy in one way in that it's already set up. But obviously right in at the deep end, you've got customers from day one that are going to be demanding what some guy from before knew how to do and getting the ropes. I guess you got a kind of guide on how to do it, and he was there.
Yeah, we were quite lucky. We inherited obviously a fantastic customer information system, but at the time, funnily enough, the entire staff walked out. So I'll never forget, we bought the company, we had a meeting with them all to say, great, this is us, this is the new thing, and they took the opportunity to all go and work for private catering. So we had one employee who had been loyal, who stayed, and in the meantime, in negotiations with the previous owner, we went out and we hired 2 new people, a master of wine who's still down here on the Côte d'Azur doing his own thing now, and then we hired another lady who was very well qualified with the diploma, who's funnily enough also down here doing their own thing. So they obviously like working down here. But in some ways that was quite liberating because it allowed you to come in and just say, okay, this is how we think we should be doing it. Has anyone got any ideas? Because as is such a seasonal business that, and there's such turnover on the yachts as they come in with staff, that it was almost like, okay, now is the right time to rebrand, now is the right time to push, but keeping what you had of the old business. You know, Vincent Frontière is a brilliant name. It's a good hook. VSF is great because it's not French. And I don't mean that pejoratively against the French, but, you know, obviously there are many, many nationalities involved in yachting. And it allows for short marketing, it allows for all of that sort of thing. But it was a good opportunity to come in and say, okay, how would we do this differently from how the previous owner had been doing it? And he himself would tell you he got stuck in his ways. And I would argue perhaps, you know, we rebranded last year because we were feeling we were pretty much stuck in our ways. So it's continually evolving. I think the hardest challenge we've had has been coming in with a very Anglo-Saxon business mentality and working in France. Yeah. For a while, that was our competitive advantage. Our biggest competitor back in the day used to be open from 9 until 5 and shut between 12 and 2 when we were doing 7 till 10, 7 days a week. They were also shut at weekends. But now people have caught on to this. It's interesting that none of our competition are really French, with the exception of maybe the new wine shop in Monaco. I don't know who's behind the money. I thought it was Russian. But many of the companies that we find ourselves doing business with are non-French run. That has been quite interesting in sort of changing the mind. We have French employees, but changing their mindset. Our finance director tells the story of his first day when he sat there and he was like 5 to 12 and he got up and said, bon. And we all just looked at him going, no, we don't do that. You know, we have lunch at our desk. That's because the needs of our business. It's not because it's the right or wrong thing to do. But it's been quite a challenge.
And when does the market when does the season start for you then?
For us, we start in April, really. But our biggest numbers always come from July. A third of our turnover is in July.
But the people, you need to get those relationships in place
exactly.
in April.
Yeah. As the yachts start coming back, if they've been away, or as they start recrewing, if they've been in the yard or whatever, that's when we start to sort of publish our list, get out and about, meeting the boats, trying to get them sort of to deal with us. I think a lot of people now with transportation links and being what they are, and I don't know if people are aware, but last year there was a big hoo-ha, or this year there was a big hoo-ha about how the French ports were suffering and there wasn't business coming into France and all of the knock-on business of that. We can attest to that too. 50% of our deliveries went to Italy this year. And that's with either us delivering them ourselves or using third-party delivering companies.
Which is huge when you're a small business to suddenly have to sort of I found that with the Reform Scolaire twice.
Yeah.
Is you think you know what you're doing, and then suddenly you're sent a massive curveball and you've got to react. Yeah,
and also not really... I mean, we get that every year with the French customs, to be honest, because obviously a lot of our wine is being exported out of French international waters. But they add a new rule every year and they change the size of this and that's just part of it. But what was very apparent this season was just the lack of boats. I mean, you go to Saint-Tropez, yes, they're all anchored off, but you know, this was the first year that I'd ever seen the IYCA empty or half empty, and you know, it really does behoove the French administration, as I know they are now looking into, to look after yachting here, because it's the knock-on. If the boats aren't anchored off, they're not going to be in the restaurants, they're not going to be using the chauffeurs, they're not going to sort of be paying even the port fees to come here.
And actually, we started this podcast because of the 14th of July to
right.
try and help bring people back, and we were hashtagging Côte d'Azur living, and so we survive basically on tourism. I think there's something like 90% of businesses here I can't remember the exact percentage, are all small businesses, and they're all relying
on tourism. Yeah, we were we're fortunate in that we have franchises in Palma, and we have one down the coast in Viareggio. But we also, this season, decided to put wine into Corsica next year. Croatia. Next year we're going to be putting wine into Corsica, so it's in situ. You know, the beauty of Corsica being that they can just get it over to Olbia in Sardinia, which is where most people are going. But if you think about it, if you're chartering, okay, you're a very rich person to be able to do this. But if you're chartering and the TVA on your charter is 6% versus 22 or 20, you're going to go to where it's 6. And if that means you get your private jet into Nice but take your charter out of San Remo, that's what you're going to do. And unfortunately, I think sometimes there can be a slightly blinkered view. They don't view Europe as one whole here in France, because actually these boats can go wherever they want to, and there's nothing holding them here. I mean, we shipped a lot of wine to Greece, we shipped a lot of wine to Croatia, again, the stuff we didn't have there. Montenegro is a different thing because it's external. We ship wine to Turkey, we ship wine all over the place where it's legal to. But as I say, last year, I mean, we were even driving wine down to Palermo, which was a 24-hour trip back to Genoa on the ferry and that sort of thing. Naples was very, very much, I think, the European hub for yachting in this part of the Med.
So they've been some challenges. What have been your big highs when you look back now over the last... What do you look back and go, wow, that was amazing?
Some of the trips that we get to go on. I mean, as you said yourself, you work for lvmh. I mean, it's an absolute honour to go up to some of these places and see. For me, whilst I know a little bit about wine, what I love, I'm not a typical about to go and do my Master of Wine. That's not where my area of passion is. But what I love is going to see these growers and going to see these winemakers, and it was quite impressive. We went up with Rhoda to meet the man who makes Cristal. He has rock star status in the world of wine, and it's just amazing to see how passionate they are, and we've been very lucky. We've been afforded some behind the behind-the-scenes tours. Rhoda is not open. They are not, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. But, you know, being able to go up to Rhoda and have a look around, being able to go to Domenot and look around and sort of meet the people that actually really care. I think other highlights are just realising that you can mix pleasure and work, which is something my job allows me to do, where it didn't before. My 12-hour days in the city only last 3 months now. I also think, and this is completely away from wine, bringing up well-balanced children down here compared to what they would be living the life in the UK. I mean, if anyone asked me, that was the beauty of my career. It allowed me to step away. I've only really been back involved for the last 4 or 5 years, and step away and be a mummy, and to sort of have a work-life balance, which arguably the French culture allows you, but a little bit too much one way. I feel being able to sort of work a very short, sharp, concentrated season and then have time for my family is actually extremely important.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's the same for me, because we write our own hours. Ish. I mean, there are times when you can't.
You don't have a choice, exactly.
But you know that article I posted earlier in Teen Riviera? So this was about maybe maternity, paternity leave should be for teenagers.
Yeah.
Because, and it was interesting, you said what I was thinking. It's, you know, when you've got them in the car.
Yes, you get that half an hour when they tell you some story, or they make you laugh, or you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And that, for me, it's essential. And that's one of the things, again, about coming down here. We didn't know that we were going to go this route to get involved with wine, but it was the idea of having the balance, being there for the children, rather than watching many of my former colleagues who described themselves as hamsters on the wheel. I had a friend come down this summer who told me that in educating his 2 boys privately and putting one through Oxford and one through Manchester, he had spent net £1.5 million. Whereas, and that's one kind of education, there's nothing wrong with it, but that's an awful lot of money, and an awful lot of times he had to turn around on his wheel to get the money to finance. I think down here our children are very fortunate. I think they stay level, grounded. Yes, they get an education that isn't without its challenges, but that's a cultural thing, and we can all, you know, especially if they're being bilingually educated, we can help there. But it is that half an hour in the car where you learn that so-and-so said so-and-so about X, but it doesn't really matter. It's just being with them and they know that you're there.
And it's gone in a flash. Mine's turned 16 today.
Oh, happy birthday.
And you're just like, gosh, you know, where did that time go? And you know that it's actually limited in a way. You must go and visit lots on the Côte d'Azur.
Yes.
And you mentioned you were looking for somewhere where there's ski, and I think you are a big skier, aren't you?
Yes, we are big skiers. I can actually get to Grolier from Le Roueré in 42 minutes if the roads are clear. That was it. For me, it was about being able to offer my children opportunities that I never had. So my parents, whilst absolutely wonderful, were not very affluent, didn't have a lot of access. I mean, funnily enough, my first holiday was to Fréjus, my first foreign holiday. If you'd have told me I came here at 13 that I'd be living here, I never would have believed you. But when I got to university, I felt socially inept because I couldn't play a musical instrument, I couldn't ski, and I couldn't speak another language. So I think if you look at drivers, they were 3 of the things. So, you know, from when my son was 3 years old, every Wednesday afternoon up to Grolier, if there was snow, for the private lessons. So the ski resorts are wonderful. It's also a little bit about knowing that you can be sort of 45 minutes from something really fascinating. Yes, I lived in London, and there's obviously a lot about that, but it's about, for me here, it's the light. It's about just waking up and looking at the green of the olives. But, I mean, for me, another place that you've asked what would be a lovely place I would recommend is Santa Agnès. I don't know if you've ever been.
No.
That's just above Menton. And one of my A-levels was history, so I'm a big history buff. But it forms part of the Maginot Line, and it's a fort in the hills. So you go all the way up. There's a reasonable restaurant you can sit and look, so you've got the fantastic view, but it's actually where the French army lived inside, and it's all been, if it was England it would cost you 45 quid and it would be a national trust property, but here it's €5 and you get to go in and you get to see how they lived underground and how they fought the Italians. The guns are still there and everything, so that as part of history is amazing. And then above there's was a former medieval chateau which you could see because of where it's sort of positioned on the coast. You can see both sides. But they're restoring the market garden or the gardens from the chateau up there as well. So that's a place I would recommend as being. It's one
I haven't tried those.
It's certainly worth trying.
Live with 2 history buffs.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
It's great when and that's the thing is, even when you've been living here a while, you still haven't discovered it all.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Fantastic.
And that's what I love about some of these Facebook groups as well, because you look for, you ask for sort of recommendations, and I think everybody down here is just really happy to tell you where to go.
There are
and what
some
to
great
do.
groups, aren't they, supporting so much. You're a reader as well, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm a reader. If I tell you our book club is called Words and Wine, that gives you a little bit of that.
Well,
maybe we should call it Wine and Words on the thing. But yes, no, I'm a big reader. It's we try and pick, like yourselves, I know you're in the rival group, but we try and pick books that interest. Some can be challenging, some can be interesting. You know, at the moment we've had a couple of challenging ones, and everybody's reading Dan Brown because it doesn't allow you to think. I mean, I hark back to being a child. My favourite book is Winnie the Pooh, and I know it shouldn't be, but I think there are a lot of life lessons.
Rules.
No,
rules.
You know, I loved it being read to me. B, I loved reading it to the children. And I think, you know, you can do a lot worse than look at some of the things they say about Eeyore and how he's gloomy and all of this. There are life lessons, obviously, that A.A. Milne put in there for his child, and I think there's a lot we can gain from that.
And it's very on trend, because isn't there a film coming out around now? I'm sure there is about
there?
Christopher Robin or something.
Yeah, I hadn't thought that. There is one. The one I want to see is Paddington 2. We need that English version somewhere.
Yeah. Roquefort Les Pins, if you're listening, can you put it on, please? Because you did last
it for us
time.
before, yeah.
And Peter Rabbit's coming out next year as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's kind of all in the British writers, childhood writers.
Coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, very good.
Brilliant. Okay, now if people wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
We have a webpage, www.vsfgroup.com, or email me at Claire, CLAIRE, at vsfgroup.com. For now, just up on a couple of the websites and up on our website and a couple of the Facebook groups, we've put together some Christmas specials. If people are not looking to just drink French and aren't capable, willing or whatever to drive over to Italy, we've put together some different selection boxes and cases, and also we're offering a gift service as well. This is something we dare not to do normally, because a lot of our licensing agreements, especially with the French wines, mean that we have to sell only to yachts, certainly with some of the big champagnes as well. But so many of my friends are like, I need a Chilean red, or I'm looking for another Kiwi Sauvignon Blanc, I'm looking for Australian Chardonnay, that sort of thing. And so we've put together some mixed cases for people who just want to try something a little bit different.
Brilliant. And so they can get that on your website or in the Facebook group. And you were telling me that you had some guides on your website as well.
Yeah, there's a little bit of food wine matching, and I've just poo-pooed food wine matching obviously earlier, but no,
it is important to some people. So
it's very important, and it's also a lot of people like to learn about the terroir. They like to know how champagne evolved. There's a nice little history bit on our website. There are some guides as to what food and wine.
And for chief stewardesses, their bosses will want to know that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they do need to know that.
They do. And something we do with every wine selection we send, especially to the yachts, we send out tasting notes, because they don't have time. They're running around. They're worried about whether or not the carpet's clean. And as well, they're having to serve the wines and have some knowledge around the wines. So part of the service we provide is tasting notes with everything that gets sent out.
And you also said a big key thing of VSF is making the job for the chief stewardesses as easy as possible.
Yeah, but a lot of our businesses turn around. So, if you're a back-to-back charter boat, you have 2 days maybe to get the boat ready for somebody else. And so what you want a van turning up with all your waters, all your wines, all your soft drinks, when you want it to, without any delay, and not over-promising. That's the one thing I think that a lot of our competitors do, because they don't have the stock. For us, if you ring and you say, I need this, this, this and this at 7 o'clock Sunday morning, you'll get it at 7 o'clock Sunday morning, unless I've told you there and then that I don't have it, or will not be in a position to get it.
You're ethical, there's not the fake promise.
Never a fake promise, and with that comes overhead. A lot of people will say, VSF, they're far more expensive than everybody else. Yeah, but nobody else has got a warehouse, nobody else has got the van fleet. So there is a little bit of you get what you pay for, really.
Yeah.
One big thing about wine that a lot of people don't really focus on is provenance. You yourself will know about provenance, having done your previous job, but it's as I alluded with the Petrus, there's so much fake wine around now. It's a lot of the wine we have, or over 50% of the wine we have, we bought en primeur. And so we know definitively that wine has not travelled, it has not flown, it is not fake. I'm not suggesting our competitors are selling fake wine at all.
But people should be aware
you need to know that provenance of wine is an incredibly important thing.
Yeah, especially when you're paying the price tag.
The prices they're paying, yeah.
Well, it has been fascinating, and it seems like it's too early for a drink now, but...
Never too early, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Claire, thank you ever so much for popping in, and been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. For those of you that want the rules, there are rules, and you can go to their website and find out from them which foods they recommend to go with which fine wine. And for those of you like me who don't really like following the rules, then we heard it from the boss of the VSF, you don't have to follow those rules. So I'm going to get me some Poppy Santa Lucia Chardonnay, I think, for the veggie option over Christmas, and I think it'd be great to try some Prosecco Extra Dry. Mr. BB, well, I'm guessing he'll be checking out some of those reds that they got. If you're listening in November, December 2017, then the VSF free PDF to their seasonal offers can be found and downloaded on rivierafirefly.com/27 or from vsfgroup.com. Voila! Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Happy holidays!
This episode was brought to you by Riviera Firefly for Côte d'Azur Living by your host and my mum, Antonia Beauvoisin-Brown. Please subscribe, like and share. Until the next time, au revoir les Fireflies!